Good evening. Well, it seems Robert Blake just can't stay away from the Civil War. So we're going to look at his latest video. Everything you learned about the Civil War is wrong. And it's going to be a typical thing when neo-Confederates, they'll give you one side but not the other side. And they tell you stuff, this but not that, and try to give like a slant. And the war wasn't, of course, about slavery. The war wasn't about slavery at all. So let's see what they have to say here. Let's see here.
Everything you were taught about the Civil War is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
By Lachlan Seabrook.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have...
That being said, why is this guy so hung up on pushing this agenda? Why is this guy so hung up trying to tell you something that's not true? That the war was not about slavery, when it was. Slavery is written into the Southern Constitution, the Confederate Constitution. It's part of their Constitution. Now, I bet he doesn't even mention that. Negro slavery, Negro slavery, people. Okay? That was what they were fighting for, to continue the expansion of Negro slavery. That's why they seceded. At least the lower South. And then the other states seceded when the North asked for volunteers, and they said, okay, we're going to join those. But they all joined up with the Constitution, the Confederate Constitution, that would allow expansion of Negro slavery.
I have a favorite new author. Everything I knew as a Southerner about the Civil War and all the facts just happened to be in this book. It's just laid out perfectly. So if you want to know more about the Civil War, I would ask y'all to get this book. I bought it on Amazon.com.
If you're a true Southerner, you'd be saying war for Southern independence, not the Civil War. The Civil War is really how the Northerners describe it.
Thing you were taught about the Civil War is wrong, by Lachlan Seabrook. And this was an easy read and a good read, and I enjoyed it. I also got another book by him. Abraham Lincoln was a liberal. Jefferson Davis was a conservative.
Here we go. Yeah, like 19th century concepts are going to be pushed into the 21st century. Liberal and conservative. Jefferson Davis is a Democrat. Lincoln was a Whig that became a Republican.
This is what it looks like. And he even wrote another book, Confederate Flag Facts. So I pretty much have found a new author that
Confederate Flag. These guys, man.
Really like, Lachlan Seabrook. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting because my dad grew up in Seabrook, Texas. I don't know, that's just kind of neat. But when I grew up here in the South, in Milton, Florida, I'll never forget being in about 6th, 7th, 8th grade, one of those, because I was in middle school. I remember our teacher teaching in history class, and she says, now, one thing I want you all to remember is this. She says, I want you all to remember that the South was right, and it was about states' rights.
And it wasn't about states' rights. For one thing, states' rights don't exist. There's no such thing as states' rights. They're individual rights. States exist to protect the individual. There's no such thing as states' rights. Then he's going to talk about the right to secession. There's no right to secession. It's not even in the Confederate Constitution, people. Even in the Confederate Constitution, they don't give a right for states to secede. It's baloney.
And I remember being taught that in a secular school here in Milton, Florida. And I remember my teacher saying that and saying, now I want you to study it. She said, you get to college, sure as the world, they're going to teach you that it was all about slavery. But they're wrong if you study it out. She said that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start today with Isaiah chapter 5 and verse 20. One of them that call evil good and good evil. Mm-hmm. That put darkness for light and light for darkness. That put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. God says there's a woe on somebody if he calls evil good and good evil.
Yeah.
And God says, you think you're wise, you really need to study. Mm-hmm. See, there are a lot of people out there that think they've got this Civil War thing figured out. Mm-hmm. And they're going by revisionist history. They're going by what the victors wrote.
No, this is revisionist history. We have the original documents. We have what the vice president said that the South was going to be built, the Confederacy was going to be built on a new cornerstone, one where the Negro was an inferior race. That's what documented, people. We have the Confederate Constitution, where they wrote Negro slavery into it. That's not in the American Constitution. I have the Confederate Constitution over here, and they compare the American Constitution to the Confederate Constitution. Big blank spot where the American Constitution is. They didn't put slavery, the word slavery, in there. Old Baker loves that word slavery. That's why he wants to change the word servant to slavery.
And they're not going to the source to see for themselves what the truth is.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are wrong about the Civil War, and they think the North was right and the South was wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they justify this belief by saying, and the South were slave owners and they were evil. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say the evil South, or the evil Confederates, or the evil Confederacy, or the
Confederacy was evil. The Confederacy was evil because it was defending an evil constitution. In their constitution, they had the right to continue Negro slavery expansion. Negro slavery. Okay? He's not going to mention that. I guarantee you, people, he is not going to say one word about what the Confederate Constitution said in it about Negro slavery.
The evil Southern people.
No one said the Southern people. Lincoln never said the Southern people were evil. He was married to a Southern. See, this is his hyper paranoia. Hyper paranoia. No one said everyone in the South was evil. No one said everyone in the Confederacy was evil. No one said everyone in the South was fighting for slavery. But the slaveholders were. Because they wrote it in the Constitution.
And I look at that and I go, well, that's not the South that I grew up in. That's not
the South he grew up in. That's not the South he grew up in, people. The war was 1860. The war was in 1860. And he's talking about the South he grew up in. That's 100 years later. What are you talking about?
South that I know. The other day, I went fishing out at Carpenter's Park, where I did my video recently about the COVID-19 as an attack. I was fishing there, and I drove in, and I drove right by the boat launch. And I saw something that just confirmed to me what I already know, having studied this all out, that everything we're being taught today is a lie. Today, when they see the Confederate flag, they say, racist hate, and that's what you're supposed to believe because they say that. Well, I saw something that was interesting. I saw a black man in a pickup truck.
Oh, here we go. They're going to see a black man with a Confederate flag, and that's supposed to change something.
With Confederate flags all over it. Launching his bass boat.
Whoa, that changes everything, people. You got the American flag or you got the Confederate flag, people. You don't got both. That's the reality. They fought against each other. Now, you want to keep the Confederate flags in some museum? That's fine. But don't act like they're the American flag. They don't. They don't represent freedom. The Confederate flag does not represent freedom. The American flag represents freedom.
White friend. Now, you're supposed to believe that the Confederate flag
is a simplistic, naive, childish thinking of a 12-year-old. That he sets up these little straw men. Everyone hates the Confederate flag. When you see the Confederate flag, you're supposed to think racism and this, that, and the other thing. What we're supposed to think is that it represented a cause that was defending slavery. Because it did. It's in their Constitution, Robert Breaker.
Racist, and that whites and blacks in the South, why they hate each other.
No one said that. No one said that. Straw man. He's no different than Brian Dengler. It's not different than all these other guys out there who said straw men. They think all the blacks and whites hate each other in the South. See how long we get along with each other? Yeah, and Jim Crow laws. That was the argument for Jim Crow laws. We get along well in the South with Jim Crow laws. That was the argument.
That's what they try to get across to. And here was a white guy and a black guy that were friends.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And I don't know if the black guy owned the truck, but he was driving a truck that had Confederate flags all over. Right?
does that mean anything? I mean, it has nothing to do with history. It has nothing to do with the issue. And he said, that's in the South I grew up in.
There in the front window shield, right there hanging.
That's just hypersensitivity about his heritage. But go to his blog and see why the Civil War still matters, people, if you don't think this guy's a nut.
Off of the.
He's got 187 thumbs up on this. This guy is telling you that evil is good and good is evil. The verses he wrote are pointing to him. The Confederacy, if it had won, it would have expanded slavery. That's the reality of it. And even the Confederates, many Confederates recognized it was good. There's Robert E. Lee said it was good that the Confederacy had lost.
Of the mirror, everything. And I said, why would a black guy have...
By the way, Robert E. Lee recognized that there was no legal grounds for secession. I have his letters, Robert Lee's memoirs. And he has memoir. He says, there's no legal right for secession. Secession is revolution.
Confederate flag unless he knew what I knew. And what a lot of people are teaching today is lies. So when you study out the Civil War, you can see why a black guy would like the Confederate flag. It's about heritage, not about hate.
It's heritage, not hate. Well, then you should have no problem with your daughters marrying a black man. Isn't he only issue about his issue about interracial marriage? His heritage? His whole big thing on why Christians can't enter interracial marriage is he wants to keep the same heritage. But now he's saying a black man can share the same heritage. Do you understand how confused this guy is?
Many of you I've told to look up H.K. Edgerton, a man in South Carolina who is a Confederate black man. And he's a man
who... The Confederates at the end of the war were desperate and they put blacks in, and the blacks were fighting in order to get their freedom. That didn't deny the fact that the Constitution was still going to have slavery. You had free black people in the Confederacy. You had free blacks in the Confederacy, free people, black people. It got rarer and rarer because they cracked down on slavery and came tougher and tougher by 1840s, 1860. This is all history that he wants to give you a piece over here and a piece over there.
Who's black that loves the Confederate flag. Now this book, everything you were taught about the Civil War is wrong. The very beginning of this book is quite amazing to me. Because the very beginning of this book is a foreword by Nelson W. Winbush. Nelson W. Winbush, he's a black man standing in front of a Confederate flag. He says, my grandfather, Louis Napoleon Nelson, was a Confederate soldier, who in his later years related many of his war experiences to me. At age 14, he accompanied his master's two sons, Sidney and E.R. Oldman, as members of the 7th Kentucky Cavalry. Louis...
His master's two sons.
This guy's grandfather was made the temporary chaplain. Later at Lookout Mountain, his position was made official, making him the only known black Confederate chaplain. He told me that when he was conducting services, it was not uncommon for Confederates and Yankees to worship together. When the service...
Oh, wait a minute. Yankees weren't supposed to be Christians. Yankees and Confederates worshiping together? Well, according to a breaker, all the Yankees that came down were Universalists and Unitarians and were spiritualizing the King James Bible.
It was over, soldiers returned to their respective sides to resume firing at each other.
What does it tell you? That both sides were Christian? That the North, this guy lied to you already? He gets in that blog, he talks about the Yankees being all Unitarians and Universalists and pagan, atheists, and so they didn't read the King James Bible the way the South read it literally. Oh, there they are worshiping there together, Confederates and the Yankees.
This guy continues, this is a black man talking about how he loves the Confederate flag, how it's a flag of heritage to him, and how his grandfather was a Southern black man who was a black chaplain during the war. And
he was a slave, which means he got freed by Lincoln.
And he says here,
and this is not anything new. The South, before they started cracking down, used to have in the churches integrated services. And they would have black ministers. This is nothing new. No one's hiding anything. But the South cracked down on it. They got scared of the blacks because they were afraid of slave revolts. They were afraid that the slaves were going to revolt against them. Especially after the Nate Turner revolt. And so they stopped teaching their slaves to read and write and the Bible. And that came later, towards the end, as we got closer to the Civil War. They tried to stifle Congress with the Gag Act, where John Quincy Adams had to fight against that. You want to read some history? Read that. How in Congress, they would not allow people to speak out against slavery. Read in the Senate, where if you were up against the South, against the slaves, a Southerner would come up and beat you. William Sumner was beaten by this guy over cane, almost killed. And the guys were going armed into the Senate. He's not going to tell you that.
History has a strange way of recording things. To the victor go the spoils, but the war between the states...
So now it's just saying it's a revisionist history. Now, if you read all history, you'll see exactly what's going on. When it comes to Second Memorial, he says they were wrong on both sides. He said that's why the fighting was going on so long. And this side expected the war to go on. But the fact of the matter is that it was reparations that both sides are going to have to pay for the slavery that had happened 400 years. Don't forget, Thomas Jefferson wanted to blame King George III for slavery. He was forced to stop. He was going to put that in the Declaration of Independence. But the Southerners didn't want him to put it in there.
No real winner. And I believe that. We're still suffering today from that war. And he continues here. Now, this book, everything you were talking about...
Well, 3 million slaves were happier. I'll tell you that. 3 million slaves got freed.
War is Wrong is an excellent book. Now, I remember when I was in Bible school at Pensacola Bible Institute.
Here we go.
And I remember, was it the day where we took the class picture? It might have been that day. It might have been a different day. But I remember old Peter Ruckman was sitting there, and here came the assistant pastor. And I was sitting on the front row, and I listened to what the assistant pastor said. Assistant pastor came out and gave a book to Ruckman, my old pastor. And he says, well,
He's your old teacher. Why do you keep calling him your pastor? Ruckman was the teacher there. He keeps calling him his pastor. Ruckman was the major teacher there. He acts like he was going to his church. He was going to his school.
Ruckman, you convinced me the South was right. Now, this man was a Yankee.
Oh, you convinced me. Oh, yeah.
And Dr. Ruckman said, hey, the South was right. Let me show you some books in order for you to understand what I understand, what I see. Now, Ruckman grew up in Maryland, so he was born a Yankee. I can't tell you how many friends I have down here in the South that are Yankees. And they all tell me, Breaker, the South was right.
Mm-hmm.
I said, were you talking
idiots?
About that as a kid? No. As a Yankee, they said the South was evil and now the South is wicked. I moved down here. I saw something that I couldn't figure out.
No one says the South was evil. This guy's a moron. Lincoln never said the South was evil. The Confederacy was evil because it was defending an evil system of slavery in its Constitution.
Why were the people so kind? Why were they so nice? Why was it...
You get nice people in every country. What does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with anything? Do you think the German people aren't nice people? What? You go to Germany, World War II, said, well, these people are nice. How the Japanese? World War II said, man, these guys were nice people. Yeah. Individually, they were very nice people. What does that have to do with the issue of what they were fighting for?
Everything's just so great. Why was there such Southern hospitality?
Yeah. Why were they beating people in Senate, Robert Breaker, over the head with their cane and threatening their lives? Why were they gagging the Congress and the House of Representatives so they couldn't even bring up slavery? And John Quincy Adams had to fight against that when he was in the House of Representatives. He won't tell you that because he's got superficial knowledge, people. Just like he has superficial knowledge of the Bible. It's a mile wide and an inch thick and thick. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Why was there a church on every street corner? And they said, you know what? I began to study.
What, the one church is on every street corner in the North? This is the Philadelphia church age. You don't think the North is full of churches?
Civil War, and I found out the South was right. The North was wrong.
Oh, yeah. Well, what are we wrong about?
And that's what you come to in a conclusion if you just simply look at the facts. And so I'll never forget that assistant pastor saying,
You don't have the facts.
well, Ruckman, you convinced me the South was right.
Yeah, Ruckman convinced a lot of people over stupid things.
I've met other people too, and many of them, same thing. I've studied this out for myself. So one of the best books to find on the truth about the Civil War is this one. And it's modern. It's a new book. It was written, let me see if I can find you the date that this was written. And I would ask you, as my viewer, to please get this book and read this book and find out about this.
I would ask anybody with break of view is to ask him about what the Confederate Constitution said. What were they fighting for in their Constitution? The Confederate flag represents what you're fighting for. It was fighting for the expansion of slavery. You can jot all you want about anything else. They rejected the idea with the Dred Scott decision that the black man, one, could become a citizen of the United States. That's why we needed the 14th Amendment. Two, that all men were created equal was for everyone, not just the white man. That came from the Dred Scott decision. And that's what they were hammering home. The Confederacy was built on that cornerstone of the Dred Scott decision. You don't believe it? Read the cornerstone speech by the then Vice President Stevens. I think it's Stevens. I can't remember that guy's name.
Book and find out for yourself. Well, it was literally written in 2010, but it's been updated several times up to 2019 by Locklane Seabrook. Okay? Now, there's so many things, and the way that this book is set up, it's pretty cool. It's set up by saying, you were taught, well, here's the truth. You were taught, here's the truth. You all through the whole book, it's you were taught this, but here's the truth. And that's what's so amazing about this book.
So amazing.
I would ask you to get it. It's really will help you, okay? Now, this book is the one entitled, Abraham Lincoln was a liberal, Jefferson Davis was a conservative. Now, if you get this book will help you as well to see America today and how it was before. And this is what's interesting to me. Democrats were the ones in the South, and they were conservatives.
The Democrats were conservatives. They were slave owners. Democrats were responsible for Jim Crow laws. Democrats were responsible for gun control laws. Democrats were responsible for suppression of the black vote in the South during the Jim Crow days in order to keep the Democrats' control. But they're the conservatives. You're right.
The Yankees were liberals, and they were Republicans. Today, it's the exact opposite.
That's you know who would say that? Democrats. Democrats would say that. They say the Republicans will come to them. Oh no, the Republicans were the Democrats of the South. That's what the Democrats want you to believe. Oh no, they're the same guys. Same guys.
Today, many of your Republicans claim to be conservatives, and many of your Democrats claim to be liberals. So we've seen a complete reversal. All right? Abraham Lincoln is the equivalent of a modern-day Democrat socialist. And if you look into Lincoln, Lincoln actually liked a big government. He wasn't in favor of a small government.
He was a Whig, and they believed in internal improvements. Emma, keep things in context. There was no income tax then. It was tariffs. That's how you funded. So the country was basically had a problem because the country was going to have to deal with transportation issues and the growth of certain issues like that. So Whigs were for internal improvements that were paid for by the governments, while the South wasn't. The South was against all that.
Wanted a big government. You look at Jefferson Davis, he wanted small government. He was conservative.
Small government in the sense he wanted the idea that he wanted to keep his state basically internalized and keep the traditions alive and keep slavery. Slavery was part of their cornerstone, their traditions. And so that's what they were fighting for. They were fighting for to keep that old way. And the issue was, how are you gonna pay for things and how are you gonna support things? But Lincoln, by any standards, if you look at today's standards, he would be totally conservative, a complete conservative. And during the war, Jeff Davis did nothing different than Lincoln did.
Even though he was a Democrat, he was more like our modern Republicans. Even though Lincoln was a Republican, he's more like our modern Democrats.
That's how they try to change. You can't put that's not how you read history. You can't read history. If you put Lincoln today in modern history, he'd be. If you put John F. Kennedy today, he'd be considered conservative. He'd be looking around and saying, "These people crazy? These liberals?"
And so this book really explains it well, and this book goes back to the American Revolution and the founding of America, and how there were two parts.
Lincoln was fighting for the Declaration of Independence, the founding principles of the Founding Fathers. That's why he'd be considered conservative. He was for the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson Davis was not. The Confederacy was not. That's the basis that you're going to look at. The Declaration of Independence. Was the Declaration of Independence the founding document, the cornerstone of the United States? Or was it for just white men, like the Dred Scott's decision said? Well, I'm going to put this up and deal with some more. And I'm going to get the book. We'll go through it. This guy has a thing where, and hear about the heritage. Well, if heritage is the issue, why can't you interracial marry then with a black man who loves the Confederate flag? Your daughter, interracial with another Christian man. All of a sudden now it's, hey, he got your same heritage. I'm stop and put this up, and I'll get you the books. I'll show you the books. He gives all these little anecdotes, somebody convinced, about Peter Buckman, you have convinced the South is right. Yeah. Did you look at their Constitution? They think slavery's right. They still think they want you to be a slave. Oh, you were bought with a price. We were bought out of slavery, not into slavery. That's why we want to change the word in 2 Corinthians 6:20. About slavery. It's that it's servant. And they changed the word slavery. He changed the word slavery. 2 Corinthians 6. Is it 9? Must be 9. Bought with a price. First Corinthians 6. Yeah, excuse me, 1 Corinthians 6:20. We bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and your spirit, which is for God's. So I'm going to stop with this up, 1 Corinthians 6:20. Put this up and we'll go through it again and deal with this. And you say, why all the fuss? Well, clearly, it's an issue. All the Confederate soldiers and Union soldiers were worshiping together. How about that? Isn't that amazing? After the time, all the Union soldiers came down to Universalists and Unitarians. So we stopped and listened to the rest of this nonsense. Amen. Thank you.